Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Pediatric Summit webcast. This is part 6 of the 8-part series, and I'm your host, Amanda. I am so excited to be here today. And throughout this whole webcast, I've learned so much, and it's been awesome talking to all these amazing docs. And I'm really excited for the Pediatric Summit, which will be October 6th and 7th. And all of these amazing docs that I've been interviewing will be at the summit. So if you haven't reserved your seat yet, make sure you get to thepediatricsummit.com where you can purchase your ticket for our October Pediatric Summit. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Linda Slak. And Dr. Slak has a practice in Massachusetts with her husband. She decided to further her education where she became certified in pediatrics with the ICPA. She also became certified with child developmental disorders through the Academy of Functional Neurology. She was the co-founder of the Slak Institute, where she teaches the pediatric finishing camp, which is amazing, and she'll tell us more about that hopefully. And she speaks nationwide, and we are so lucky to have her here today. Dr. Slak, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Amanda. Thank you for having me on today.
Yes, we are so excited to have you. So just a little bit about you. You started, or you're a co-founder of the Slak Institute, and you have a practice in Massachusetts. What in the last 30 years have you seen differently that has changed throughout your practice?
Right, so 30 years when I graduated from practice, my husband, Jean-Marc, had to go back to France to the French Army. So I came to Massachusetts and started practicing as an associate doctor in a family practice. We saw lots and lots of families, but the uniqueness, thinking back on it, the first patient to enter our office was the parent, not the child. And how we got the children in was through our new patient orientation, which we held every single week. And we explained chiropractic and the trauma of the birth process and the importance of getting their children checked as soon as possible. And then the parents would bring their children in. So we created our family practice that way. Now, through the years, also those children mostly were well. They had no complaints when they first came into our office, which was exceptional. And we also did see children who had injuries and ear infections as well. But if they came in through our new patient orientation, they had no complaints initially. We were just checking them for subluxation and correcting them. Then we move on to 30 years later now, as I've developed my specialized pediatric practice, which is now, I see mostly babies in the practice. They're all referrals. The first patient that comes to see me is the infant or the child with a developmental disorder. And so it's the opposite of what it was 30 years ago. And every child that I see also, like 30 years ago, checking babies right on the way home from the hospital, we might find 50% of them at most subluxated at birth. And today it's 99 or 100%. Actually, there was a really good study that came out last fall in November that is great to use in practice that correlated and showed that 99% of children have some form of subluxation at birth. So why are children showing up with problems at birth now more so than they ever did before? I think that it is the toxins in our environment. I think Dr. Melillo touched on this last month. And it creates, like in utero, before they're even born, we have these things, toxins interfering with the development of the infant, and epigenetic changes occur. And as mentioned before as well, if it's epigenetic, it's correctable. We can make a change. And chiropractors are the only ones that I know of that can do that. So that's why every infant needs to be checked at birth. What also happens through the actual birth process, pediatric chiropractors talk about this all the time. The first subluxation occurs through the birth process itself, even the very best birth, right? Because there could have been in utero constraint, malpositioning of the baby or breech positioning, and then the actual birth process itself, if it's prolonged, if it's short and fast, if there's shoulder dystocia, or if the birth ends up in a C-section, or if the doctor has to use forceps or vacuum extraction. We know with those three things, C-section, forceps, and vacuum extraction, that baby's going to need some cranial work.
Mm-hmm. So as chiropractors, what specifically are we doing that's different than everybody else?
Yeah, so because we deal with the nervous system, the main purpose of an infant's body is to grow and adapt, right? And so they're basically eating, digesting, eliminating, and sleeping. And they can't move. They rely on their parents for everything else. So you need this nervous system to function properly, and particularly the parasympathetic nervous system, which we rely on to be able to change into a rest and digest state. Mm-hmm. So when there's interference in this part of the nervous system, the baby is going to be in a state of what we call fight or flight. And I like to call it sympathetic overdrive. These babies come in and they're stressed out and their cortisol levels are high. They're always in a constant state of danger, right? Feeling danger. And what is it going to look like when they come in? Some of the symptoms that the parent might report are that the baby has difficulties with the ability to nurse, latch. They come on and off the breast. They might be inconsolable at certain parts of the day, usually later in the day or in the evening for several hours. Their abdomens might be distended. They frequently feed or may want to nurse all day long just to get some relief of their discomfort. Their legs are going to be flexed, their hands are going to be clenched, and their fists are going to be tight. And that's also due to their being uncomfortable. And then we might see some excessive reflux occurring and projectile vomiting. And we all know what the pediatrician is going to recommend for that. So the only thing that the parent can offer is short-term relief, because they often will tell us that the only way they can comfort the baby is to have them rest on themselves to sleep. And as soon as they put that baby down, they startle and they start to cry. So as chiropractors, we are the only ones, right, who look to locate, detect, and correct the vertebral subluxation complex, which relieves that pressure on the nervous system so the brain can communicate well to the body, and we can create that balance within the autonomic nervous system so that the baby's whole demeanor changes. They're able to latch on. They're not going to be pulling off. They're not going to be screaming. They're not going to get out of control. And we mustn't forget the moms, because when the babies are that tense and dysregulated, the moms are like seconds from tears. They're so upset, as well. So that creates some tension all along. She might have problems with her milk supply the more stressed out she gets.
Yeah, and as the baby gets older, what are some ongoing effects if we leave the subluxation?
Leave it uncorrected. So the longer we leave the subluxations uncorrected, the more chance we have, or the longer we have where the infant and the child will create compensatory mechanisms and patterns. And so their nervous system and their bodies are working harder to do the same functions that should happen just innately and naturally. Mm-hmm. So let's use the example of colic, right? We have the baby, the infant who had colic, and then that grows into continued abnormal sleeping patterns. So the child might not be able to sleep through the night. Digestive problems and as well may persist. So, and then the pediatrician probably, if they never get to a chiropractor, the pediatrician is going to prescribe some drugs that are going to then make matters even worse, right? The child's going to become sicker. There's side effects of those medications, and it sets them up for a lifetime of really chronic illness at this point. Mm-hmm. So the sooner we can help an infant towards normal health, better it is for them on the long term.
Yeah, definitely. So when you remove these subluxations, is it like a one-time thing, or how long? What are the effects of going for long-term care then for pediatrics?
Right. That's a really good question. So in the beginning of care, when an infant comes in with a problem, they really need intensive care. So I think one of the biggest mistakes I made early in practice is that I didn't see them enough. So I didn't get the desired results that I was looking for. And then when you have a well baby, you check them, once, twice, they're good, they can go right into wellness care. But once you resolve that initial complaint, then it's important to explain to the parents that ongoing care is necessary because the nervous system is growing so rapidly in the first 2 years of life. As we know, by year 2, 80% of the brain the brain is developed to 80% of its adult size, and by age 5 or 6, it's at 90%. So much is happening in the nervous system within the first 2 years of life, and all of the milestones that we go through that pediatricians say it's not important that they meet on time. It is so important that they meet them on time, and it's critical that all of those primitive reflexes become inhibited within the first year of life as well, to allow for proper brain function and those connections that happen between the left and right hemispheres eventually.
Yeah. So I think the biggest problem for students now and docs starting out is kind of where you were, as it was hard to get yourself to talk about how your patients need to keep coming more often. How do you convey the message to parents specifically about their child with ongoing care?
Yep, so I do that at what I call my table talk. On every visit, we talk about something. And especially if they have older children, naturally in conversation, it'll probably come up because the older children who had never had chiropractic care, they might say, "Oh, Johnny has ear infections. Is there anything you can do to help that?" So it naturally brings that conversation along, or I'll ask some questions, some specific questions about what do you think? And the education process begins really after the day 1, day 2 process, when you have that the parent has already understood the value of what you're doing for their child in the moment, and then you have to continually educate to bring them to the next phase.
Mm-hmm. How do you handle some of the objections that you get from parents about maybe their baby is healthy and they don't see the need for it?
Correct. So first you have to speak with the parent, and you have to find a need. So there's always something, whether it's something that they fear in development in the future. Sometimes, especially dads, when they come in now actually in practice, most of the time, mom and dad come in, at least for the first visit, which that didn't used to happen either. It used to always be just mom. So in the day 1, in that process, you have to find a need. The parent has to understand that there's a need, or you have to create it. You have to explain to them the importance of it. And the fact is that there are 1 in 6 children today, by the time they get to school age, have some type of neurodevelopmental delay or learning disability. And it's my belief, and that's why I focus on the age 0 to 4, that if we get a properly functioning nervous system and a clear nervous system before that time, they'll get to school and they won't have any issues with learning development because their brain will be wiring and firing correctly.
Mm-hmm. What are some objections that you get from parents a lot that you have came up with things to reply back to?
Yep. So, and these objections, by the way, we're going to handle on our day 1, day 2 interaction with the parent. So what is it? Will it hurt? Especially even on the initial visit, when you're just doing an exam, they're saying, "Are you going to hurt my baby?" I don't get this anymore because all of my patients are referrals. So I'm noted as the expert. So parents are coming in with greater trust now. But before some parents would come in and say, "You're not going to touch my baby today. I just came in here to talk." So you have to meet that and answer those objections before they even arise. So the questions are, will it hurt? Is it safe? Right? How long is it going to take, and how much is it going to cost? Those are all the things that the parents want to know. Those are the 4 main things that the parents want to know before care even starts, right?
Mm-hmm. And then, so you discuss all of those in your day 1 and day 2?
Correct.
Okay.
Probably in the day 1 before they go. So, and then bringing it back up in day 2.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the conversations at your table talk? You mentioned ear infections, but do you keep discussing all the neurodevelopmental disorders that you are aware of, or what do you discuss in your table talk?
In table talk, I talk mostly about milestones, the next milestone they can expect with the baby. I hand out a sheet of milestones. I express the importance of those milestones being met and let the parent know that we want to monitor it closely, and especially if we are not reaching a milestone, that we can help.
Yeah.
So there's things that we can do that can help, and that's what I teach that in my class.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I heard you mentioned that a lot of your patients are referral based now. And
Yes.
I know a lot come from the lactation consultant.
Yeah, mostly from lactation consultants, sometimes midwives, doulas. But lactation consultants in our area are very much on board with, they might not understand chiropractic perfectly, but they know to refer infants to chiropractors. So the way to get those referrals is to go out and seek those groups and give talks to your local La Leche League or breastfeeding councils, meet up one-on-one with them, send them, I send them a study that I did in 2012 on breastfeeding and lactation. So with a letter, so many things that you can do marketing-wise to get yourself known in the community. And then all of a sudden, just I don't know, it happened organically. People started calling me and asking me to speak in all kinds of places.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What is the best part about having a pediatric practice?
It is so fulfilling and so rewarding to me to know that I'm changing the lives of these children from birth or whatever stage it is. I'm changing the course of their entire life. And the most rewarding case, I guess, that I see are children with autism. As you know, by 2032, it's expected that 1 in 2 children are going to be diagnosed with autism. That's really super scary, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a child come into your office that is nonverbal, grunting, running around in circles, biting on their arm, just totally can't make eye contact, and then those things that we take for granted, right? The first day the child walks in and says, and looks you in the eye, or runs to go play in the kitchen, which they never, engaged in play before, or they say, "Hi, doctor," their first words. It's just truly amazing. But for those cases, I want to really stress that how I learned how to take care of these kids was by taking Dr. Melillo's class and course in neurodevelopmental disorders. It's a really specific method, and the timing has to be right, and you have to know what you're doing to get the best results. So I highly recommend taking his program as well as the ICPA program.
Yes, definitely. And can you explain a little bit about your program?
So my program came together because I had so many doctors calling me and asking questions, and I started doing just coaching to anyone who had a question within a group that I was in. And so somebody came around and said, "Hey, you should do a class on this so that everybody can learn it." So I basically took all of the things that I've learned through the ICPA, through Dr. Melillo, through practice, practical things from practice, and put them all together so that you learn how to do a proper history, a proper examination, care planning. There's very few people who will discuss, what should the care plan be for a child with X, for a well child, for a child who's sick, who's very, very sick. And we go through that. We go through how to communicate it to the parents as well. We do a thorough review of how to do the day 1 and the day 2 and create value in what we do so that the parents understand it, they want it, the child gets the best possible care.
How do you create value in your day one and day two? Like, what's your most important piece of that?
Okay, the most important thing is to create something that we call a value stack. And this is something that I learned through Clothes for Chiro, actually. And if you want to learn the business and the selling of chiropractic, it's really, people don't like the word selling, but it's really what we do, and we have to learn how to list like the things that we take for granted. For example, if you do the adjustment, of course, is the most important thing, and we explain why it's so important. And then if you do craniosacral therapy, you explain that. And if you're going to give the parent exercises for the child to do at home, these are things that I never talked about before. And even saying at this point we're going to do a re-exam, and you build that stack that we call a value stack, so that the parents like, wow, you're doing all of this stuff, and it's everything that you do that you just never really talk about. And the parents, are really wowed by it, and they thought, wow, I understand, and no one's ever explained it to me that way before.
It sounds like your practice is my dream practice. It is completely like out of love and service, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in chiropractic school. I went to DE every time it was available, and grew up in the principle with Dr. Williams of to give, to love, to serve.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to hit on? Maybe let any of the listeners know a little bit more about?
Well, how about, I was thinking about, I know you asked, like, what is something that you would recommend to students?
Yes.
And there's so many things, but the main thing that I would recommend is to remember that learning is a continuous process. I know as a student, when you're in class and you're going, oh, this isn't going to help me in any way, but once you're a doctor, the learning never ends. It's not over, and you get to choose and focus. And successful people are focused, they're goal-oriented, and they the learning process goes on and on and on. Just, it's no different than being a professional athlete. The minute you let your guard down and get too comfortable, you know that you're just being mediocre. So there are no shortcuts to excellence, and I hope that you'll all work hard and so that you can play hard.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview. We are so excited to have you at the Pediatric Summit and learn more from you.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.